Rob here on the Flanagan homestead. It's a somber day here on the homestead. I made a mistake, and because of it I have a dead ewe. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's going on and what happened. And actually, when I saw what happened, I knew it was concerning, but I was hoping it wasn't going to be as severe as it turned out to be, and I was hoping it was going to move as quickly and I was going to have a chance to treat it. So here's what happened. Here's an extreme case of what extra grain can do to your animal. Just got into it, I don't know, sometime yesterday. You could see the foam coming out of her mouth. Her belly is all distended, sticking up. Bloat there. She got into so much grain her digestive system couldn't handle it. And one day later. So as you probably know, sheep and goats are ruminants. Ruminants meaning they have 4 stomachs and they digest their food going through different chambers, and generally speaking their natural feed is they're out here on the pasture, which it's late in the summer, it's getting eaten down, but there's still plenty for them to eat, so they graze and forage the bushes and the grass, and they eat that, and their stomachs are designed to handle a small amount of food at a time, all day long, consistently eating, moving small amounts of food through, and not super high protein foods. And so when they get into grain, and that's part of the problem here, I'm going to explain that, that can mess up the digestive system, and they can get severe bloat in the case of what you just saw there, and minor levels. But let's go back to the barn and tell more of the story. All right, so I'm back by the barn here. Here's where I enter. This is the human part of the barn. There are chickens over there. The goats have access. Goats and sheep have access over there to stay warm and dry. And normally I come back over here to enter into the pasture, and I give them a little bit of grain every day. Now I know a lot of you will be saying you should never give any grain to your sheep or your goats, and you're going to use today's incident as ammunition. Say, yeah, I told you so, you shouldn't do it. Well, I don't believe that's 100% correct. Most sheep breeders and goat breeders give a little bit of grain to their animals, and I stress a little bit because that's all they're supposed to get. I give a little bit almost every day. Every morning I come out here and give a little bit of grain because I can call the animals. They come running to me. I put a little bit out, and between the number of animals, the amount I put, they're each getting just a little bit of tiny little bit of grain, but they enjoy it. But what that does is it brings them in, and I get a chance to look at them. I get a head count, make sure they're all there. I look at them. Are they moving freely? Is any animal limping, or do they look good? Do they not look good? So it's a good way to get all your animals right up close to you every day, and just look through them quickly to make sure everything's looking okay. So when I say you should have use grain sparingly. I do believe there's time, especially right now, when we're trying to breed our goats and our sheep right now so that we have some spring kids. And if you flush them, give them a little bit more grain, a little bit more protein, and they bring their weight up, their fertility rate tends to be a little bit higher, they ovulate better, and so you're probably going to have more kids in the spring. So there are times to do it, but again, you have to be careful with how you're feeding your goats and sheep. And so obviously with the video you saw at the start, something happened. So what did happen here? I come in here every day and I have buckets of grain. I have trout feed I take down to the pond for the trout. I have chicken. I have some wet cob, and I have some country buffet, which is a good all stock, goats, chickens, cattle, horses, whatever. And then I usually have a bale of hay down ready to go. But I usually take it out through this gate and feed the animals out there, make sure there's fresh water. But the other day I came through here, and this gate I push open, and the bungee cord pulls it back. I never have problems with the animals getting out. They can't open that because the bungee cord pulls it tight against the stop and they can't get out. But the other day I pushed it open to go check something out there, and there had been enough. I feed some hay in the barn as well, and they got enough on the ground that the door wedged, and I didn't realize that I got distracted and I didn't pull the door shut. So the door from the section where the animals can come into and to where the buckets of grain are it got left open, and I don't know how long. Well, sometime yesterday I left it open, and then I came back today and it was open, and the buckets of grain had been gone through and just cleaned out. And so I was a little bit alarmed. I didn't know how bad it was going to be. I hadn't seen the ewe yet, so this is later in the day now. But I knew there wasn't a ton in those buckets. I just showed you them after I had refilled them because I was getting ready to go for the next day. But I came and all the buckets were knocked over and completely eaten out. There was no wet cob left. There was no country buffet. Fortunately, they knocked the chicken bucket over and facing a direction that they couldn't get a whole lot of the chicken feed, because the chicken feed is higher protein and really not good for the system. You don't want your goats and chicken or sheep to get into the chicken feed at all. But it didn't look like there was actually a lot of that left. So when I first saw this, I knew that I hadn't had full buckets, and I was hoping that the entire herd or flock, depending on what term you want to use, had realized it at the same time and come in here and they fought over it, and so they each only got a small amount, and it wouldn't have been that drastic. But what normally happens is there's animals outside in the barn, and there's a few, and so maybe 2 or 3 animals just found it. So going back, I have a white goat that's very lethargic. I'll show you some video of her, and she's got diarrhea. She clearly got into the grain. My young goat is definitely hurting, and then you saw the ewe that died. So it's probably just I've been checking the animals. It doesn't seem like too many of the other ones even have diarrhea, so it looks like 3 or 4 of the animals found it and the rest didn't, and so they've just pounded down the grain. So that's a good thing in that I didn't have all the animals getting into it. It's a bad thing because then those few animals got a ton of grain, and a ton of grain is not good for sheep and goats. And so it's going to block up their digestive system. They're going to get bloat, diarrhea. It can be, as you see here, within the day, it can be fatal. But normally, if they just get a little bit in the bloat, here's a few things that you could do. One, and I like to do this on a regular basis, but I don't have any out, is have free access baking soda, which helps balance their digestive system out again. And then when they do get diarrhea like this, I have electrolytes that every now and then I add to their water and let them drink water with electrolytes for a day or two, and then rinse it back out, and then just put straight water again. So I normally have that in the barn. I don't have the electrolyte in the barn right now, so I'll pick up some today and put that in the water. Get the baking soda back out. I have since the first video checked all the other animals. None of the other ones, some of them aren't looking super healthy, but they don't look like they're in dire condition. But obviously that one brown ewe ate a ton of grain, and she ate herself to death. So obviously you don't want this to happen. If you're going to have animals, as many animals as I've had for as long as I have, you're going to lose some occasionally. But the reason that this is particularly bad is I know better. I know not to let the animals get into free access in the grain, and I know that they want to get to it. When I first started getting goats over 20 years ago, I had a chicken door to get into the barn, and then there was access to where the chickens could get to roost and everything, and then they could get some grain, and there was a bucket there. And the goats wanted that chicken grain so bad, so I had some boar goats, not Nigerian dwarfs like this, big boar goats, and the door was 8 inches wide by this high, and these animals were 130 pounds probably, and they would just drop down to the ground. They got in the grain one time and they got sick, and they recovered. And I was like, that can't possibly, how in the world did they get in here? Because it boggled my mind that they couldn't do it. But goats can get through almost anything. You'd be amazed at how small of a hole. So another time I put grain, and I had grain back in there, and I saw what they're trying to do. So I stood there and watched them. And these large goats just dropped to the ground, threw their legs right next to their body, and wiggled and they were touching all 4 sides, wiggled into the barn to get into that chicken feed, which again, chicken feed is terrible for them, to try to get it. Obviously I didn't let them have any, and once I realized what was happening, I closed off that door. So you get older and wiser, you make mistakes, but now I have no doors, animal doors or anything for them to get into this, but I left open the human door, and That's what caused the problem. So it's hard when you lose an animal. It's worse when you know that you made a mistake. It was your fault. It wasn't just a natural cause. But as my father-in-law says, if you're going to have livestock, you're going to have dead stock. And I mean, you shouldn't just accept it, but you should do everything you can to keep your animals healthy. But I made a mistake on this one, and I cost myself one of my ewes. This here is what goat poop is supposed to look like. After they got into too much grain, this is what it's looking like. This is also what it's looking like. It's not forming the little pellets that they're supposed to be forming. This is the one I'm most concerned about. She's just been standing still here underneath the deck. I may have to get some stuff to treat her. She was outside a little bit earlier today, but she is not feeling good. This is odd. It's almost kind of like the movies. We've had such dry summer all the way along, and then there's a death, and then the rain starts coming. It's a light rain, not much of a rain, but it is raining this morning after so many bright and sunny days. But anyway, there's a lot of good days on the homestead. I really enjoy my plants and my animals. Today was a rough day, but it'll get better again. And don't make the same mistake. Protect your animals from grain. Don't let them find the feed bag and fill themselves up, because they're going to have even if they don't die, they're going to have a painful day or two. And if you do feed grain to your sheep and goats, remember, really limit it. Don't put out huge amounts. They should be foraging out on the pasture as much as possible. And then if you have to feed them, which I'll have to be doing in the winter, dry hay, a good quality hay is probably what's best for them. Anyway, thanks for joining me on the Flanagan Homestead, where Christmas trees are my business, teaching and cleaning horticulture is my job, and outdoor projects are my passion. Hope to see you again soon, everyone. Be blessed.